Today, we're unpacking the hidden psychological costs of people-pleasing, and we're going to look at why always saying yes might actually be sabotaging your absolute closest relationships. This is a behavioral pattern that touches pretty much all of us in some capacity. And the research we're diving into today reveals some truly surprising hidden costs. Primarily, we'll see how our desperate attempts to save our relationships might be the exact thing destroying them. Okay, let's just jump right in. Seriously, take a second and think about a recent moment. When was the absolute last time you agreed to a request you genuinely, literally had zero time for? Or maybe you found yourself enthusiastically agreeing to help a buddy move out of their third-floor walk-up on your one and only day off. We've all been there, right? Perhaps you even caught yourself nodding along with an opinion you totally disagreed with, or profusely apologizing just to smooth things over when you knew for a fact you weren't at fault. These seemingly small, polite compromises, they feel completely insignificant in the moment. They just feel like a quick, easy fix to avoid a slightly awkward interaction. But the research on this behavioral pattern shows that the cumulative toll of these tiny, daily compromises on our lives is surprisingly heavy. The cost is considerably larger than it looks from the inside, because these little moments, they add up over weeks, months, and years, quietly building an invisible wall between us and the people we care about the most. There is a major paradigm shift we need to make right off the bat to understand what we often excuse as just being nice. Genuine kindness is a freely chosen act of generosity. People-pleasing, however, is an anxious reflex driven by a fear of disapproval and conflict. And this distinction matters deeply because it completely changes what is actually happening internally. Genuine kindness comes with a sense of choice and internal satisfaction. You literally feel full after giving it. People-pleasing, on the other hand, is driven by an underlying anxiety. It's that familiar, tight feeling in your chest where you feel like you just have to say yes to keep the peace. Even when the outward behavior looks totally identical to anyone watching, the internal experience is worlds apart. One is a conscious choice, the other is a desperate avoidance tactic. Chronic people-pleasing doesn't just make your calendar overwhelmingly busy. It actively compounds heavy psychological burdens. Studies find direct associations with elevated anxiety and a really deep accumulation of unexpressed resentment. When you consistently suppress your genuine preferences to avoid conflict, even if it's just agreeing to go to a terrible restaurant you secretly hate, that underlying feeling of disagreement doesn't magically disappear. It simply differs and compounds. You are quietly building a massive mountain of silent frustration over time, and that sets the perfect stage for a counterintuitive paradox. And this is absolutely crucial. Pleasing actually starves relationships of true connection. You might think you're saving the relationship by being endlessly agreeable, but the ultimate irony is that you are actively preventing genuine closeness. When you wear a highly agreeable mask to avoid conflict, your partner, your friends, your family, they aren't connecting with you. They're connecting with an avatar. They're interacting with a curated, perfectly polite shell. And over time, that creates profound loneliness because you suddenly realize they don't actually know the real you. You cannot be truly loved if you are never truly seen. By trying to please them, you are accidentally keeping them at arm's length. Take a deep breath, because understanding this gives us a massive sense of relief. People-pleasing is not a fixed personality trait. You aren't just built this way forever. It's a learned behavioral pattern. Research frequently traces it back to early environments where approval or affection felt conditional. If you learned early on that being the easy, quiet kid was the only way to get love, or if expressing a negative emotion was met with withdrawal or intense conflict, well, you quickly learned a survival tactic. You formed a deep association between genuine self-expression and real relational risk. The brilliant news here is that because it's a learned pattern, it can absolutely be unlearned with deliberate practice. Now, you might be asking, wait, don't we have to compromise sometimes? Isn't some level of accommodation just part of a normal, healthy relationship? We absolutely do. Healthy relationships require negotiation and putting someone else's needs first at times. But the vital distinction is the internal driver. Healthy compromise is a mutual and deliberate choice. It builds connection because both real people are actively participating in the choice. On the other hand, people-pleasing is a compulsive, anxious reaction to avoid making waves. Again, the action might look identical from the outside, but healthy accommodation feels like a genuine gift, whereas anxious appeasement, that feels like a trap. Here is where the rubber meets the road. 3 concrete steps to practice, directly from the research. Step 1, start small with low-stakes disagreement. Since this is a learned pattern, gradual practice is key. Express a minor preference, like picking a different place for lunch when a friend asks, rather than trying a dramatic change in a high-stakes relationship right out of the gate. Step 2, deliberately sit with the awkwardness of a boundary. Research on anxiety shows that avoidance behaviors just reinforce anxiety over time. Try letting an awkward silence hang in the air for 5 seconds without apologizing. Just let it sit there. Tolerating the discomfort of a disagreement landing without immediately rushing to smooth it over will gradually reduce your anxiety. And step 3, separate the request from the relationship. Remind yourself that declining a specific favor is not equivalent to rejecting the person. In fact, saying no to a favor actually protects the authenticity of the friendship by keeping silent resentment totally out of the dynamic. Because here is the ultimate takeaway from all this. Dropping the people-pleaser act doesn't make you unkind. You aren't trying to become a rigid, selfish person. The goal is simply to make your kindness a genuine choice again. When you stop acting out of an anxious reflex and start making deliberate, honest choices, you finally show up as the real you. And honestly, that is the only way to invite true, authentic connection back into your life. What is the very last thing you agreed to that you actually didn't want to do? I challenge you to notice where your boundaries might need a gentle reset today. Start small. Tolerate that brief discomfort and watch how it transforms your relationships. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.